Let's talk about the resumption of fighting here, because the people of Tigray, as we know, have been through so much. 2 years of war, 2 years without fuel, without cash, with 6 million people basically on the brink of starvation. Now that the ceasefire has ended, what happens to those people now, Stéphane?
Well, Zain, thank you for having me, and thank you for talking about this very important issue. When war returns, when fighting erupts again, the people suffer, and it will be the people in Tigray, it'll be people around the Tigray region who, as you said, are already in a very precarious humanitarian situation. They need food, they need support, they need health support. This fighting only makes things tragically much more complicated for all my colleagues in the field who are working to support the people of Ethiopia, all of the people of Ethiopia.
So, just in terms of what happens now that fighting has resumed, I mean, forgive me for being pessimistic, but just given how little trust there is on both sides, I mean, both sides are accusing the other of starting this particular resumption of fighting. Given how little trust there is, what are the chances of a resumption in peace talks anytime soon here?
Well, I have no crystal ball, but I can tell you that the Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, just hung up the phone a few minutes ago with the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed, to encourage, first of all, an immediate cessation of hostilities and push for a renewed inclusive political dialogue. And he will be speaking later today with the head of the TPLF to deliver the same message. And we, as the UN, will be there to support the efforts, the mediation efforts led by the African Union. The only way this ends is through a political dialogue and, of course, an immediate cessation of hostilities. And we will continue to push for that along with our African Union partners.
So Guterres spoke with Abiy Ahmed just a short time ago. What is the Ethiopian government's incentive, if you will, here to actually stop the fighting? And does Guterres have any faith that the Prime Minister is actually going to listen to him this time?
Look, I can't speak for the motivation of the government of Ethiopia or the TPLF. What I can only say is that we want the political leaders to think about the human cost of fighting. Even with the ceasefire, the cessation hostilities we've had for quite some time, you know, we've had since April the opening of the road from Semera to Mekelle, which has allowed us to bring in fuel and supplies. It's only a trickle of what was needed. But what we've seen in the last day or so is a tragic step backwards for the people of Ethiopia who desperately need, for those who desperately need humanitarian assistance.
And what more can you tell us about Tigrayan fighters essentially breaking their way into a World Food Programme warehouse and looting fuel? What more do we know about that?
Well, what we understand from our colleagues on the ground is that yesterday a group of fighters forcibly entered the WFP compound and forcibly took more than 500,000 liters of fuel. Now, what does the UN need that fuel for? We need it, of course, to deliver humanitarian assistance. We need it to drive cars to areas where we don't even know what assistance may be needed. As you can imagine, fuel is the backbone of any humanitarian operation. And so those 500,000 liters of fuel have been taken away from our folks on the ground.
Certainly very concerning. Just in terms of the sort of off-ramp here, in terms of the fighting, yes, there is very little trust between the Ethiopian government and, of course, Tigrayan fighters. We know that. But there also appears at this point to be very little trust between the Ethiopian government and the international community as well, the Tigrayan fighters and the international community. How does the international community work to mediate when it appears as though neither side is actually listening to them?
Well, you know, in any conflict situation, when fighting erupts, means there's a lack of trust. Our job as the UN is to try to overcome that. in this particular instance, working closely hand in hand with the African Union to try to rebuild that trust. The AU has mediation efforts. We're supporting them. We can't give up. Now, whether there's such a deep lack of trust, we have to keep working at it to try to rebuild that trust for the sake of the 5 million people in Tigray who need our assistance, and for all of the Ethiopian people in that general area who also depend on UN's humanitarian efforts.
Yeah, because we're not just talking about food insecurity, we're talking about 6 million people being on the brink of starvation here.
Exactly.
Stéphane Dujarric, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us today on such an important story.
Thank you.